Hello everyone, welcome to our webinar today. My name is Graham Turner and I'm the Global Operations Manager for Asiga. Today's webinar is part of our dental series and I'm pleased that we've got a leading dentist from Sydney here to talk about their workflow, and the topic is digital smile design with the Asiga Max UV with Dr. Fadi Yassmin. Dr. Yassmin is a leading cosmetic and implant practitioner based in Sydney, Australia. He graduated from Sydney University many years ago, and he holds a master's in aesthetic dentistry from King's College in London. And he's here to show us a snippet of his workflow, and we're really pleased to welcome Fadi today. So Fadi, how are you?
I'm very, very good, Graham. I know this has been a long time in the making. We had a chat about doing this over a year ago. Can you believe it?
I know.
And we still haven't been able to meet in person. We've spoken probably umpteen times and chatted many hours, but still because of all this, what's going on. But soon, hopefully, that'll come to an end. So really looking forward to today's lecture, and yeah, should be able to showcase some really nice stuff. And of course, show how the Asiga has just slotted in nicely into my workflow, which is great.
Yeah, excellent. Well, just for everyone who's watching, thanks for logging in. And throughout the webinar, we'll have the chat box open. So if you've got any questions for Fadi or for myself, please send them in and we'll do our best to answer them at the end of the webinar. So I'll duck away behind the scenes here, Fadi, and it's over to you.
No, thank you. I'll see you on the other side. I will just... Let me just... Okay, so I guess welcome everyone. Absolute pleasure to be able to give you this presentation. I was putting it together and trying to sort of work out, there's so much that I do and there's so much that I'd love to show. But I guess the basis is to show you a really good snippet of digital smile design and how we can sort of incorporate all of that into the workflow, and particularly with DSD, which is a real significant part of my everyday planning across all fronts. Just to give you a bit of background, I graduated from Sydney University, as Graham said, many years ago, in '93. And since then, I've really geared my practice to multidisciplinary treatments, so which involves extensive orthodontics and implants and obviously aesthetic dentistry. And part of that workflow has really involved really pushing the boundaries with digital smile design and what that's been able to do for my practice and for predictability of the results. For me, DSD and digital smile design is all about facially driven treatments. That is really what attracted me significantly. I mean, previously, I thought I was doing facially driven treatment, but really I was just fixing teeth for many years. We were happy with the results back then because we only knew what we knew. But with the advent of digital smile design and since then the workflows that have ensued, I found my predictability and the quality and level of workflow has increased significantly, and my results I feel they're getting better and better because of the systems in place. I'm able to push myself and be my own biggest critic, which is also something that drives me sometimes a little bit too much. What's really important, and this is a really good slide, is what we have to do these days is to digitize the patient. We're talking exceptional records, and this involves now not just standard photography, really, really good, excellent photography, excellent scanning, having a replica, an intraoral scanning, video, all of these collection of records allow us, and you can see in this video, just a summary of a case from start to finish, to be able to present and really achieve the results that our patients now expecting. But just to give you a little bit of a heads up, I guess before we start and talk about my workflows, we really got to think about the core basics of how we get to the final situation. And there's 5 main areas we will look at. Obviously design and plan, but a real significant part, and I will show you this, and this is very important as part of the presentation, how we present, what tools do we use to present. We also look at what devices do we use to be able to achieve the results that we've presented to our patients, and using that to control the final clinical outcome. So these are the 5 key pillars in the workflow, and always in the back of my mind in any workflow, whether it's a start to finish of orthodontics, whether it's a combination of orthodontics and implants, or where it's purely an aesthetic case where veneers and crown and bridge work. But let's have a little brief lesson on smile parameters. Just to give you a heads up, I know we're going to talk about smile design, but it'd be good to get you back to basics. And I guess if you sort of think back, we were first introduced to smile parameters and smile design concepts, probably first year university, when we were looking at our first denture setup. Because in essence then, all of the things we talk about now and all these digital tools that encompass all these smile parameters really came from setting up teeth and denture teeth. And there's a lot of data on this. And in terms of that, some of the things we need to analyze involve several key areas that allow us to put together and formulate a smile design. And these are listed on this slide. And you can see there's lip dynamics, the ideal incisal edge position. We're talking about incisal display during smiling and not smiling, the actual smile arc and buccal corridors, and tooth proportions. And I'll give you a little bit of a summary on each one of those. Now, incisal edge position, and that is a variance. We could see here, male display as opposed to female display, there's a huge difference. Females, particularly young females in an aesthetic context, display anything from 2 to 5 millimeters, whereas males display a lot less. And as we age, we start showing less and less of our teeth, and in fact start to show more and more of the lower teeth. So you can see that. So it's not only a variance amongst males and females, but there's also an age factor as well. And like I said, the average age displays significantly difference between a young adult and the elderly. This particular study showed a variance of 2 millimeters. In fact, it could be way more than that. And many factors, particularly the resting muscle tones and significant changes in the face, everything basically goes south. And as a result, what used to be on display is no longer on display, and things that weren't on display are on display. And particularly, this is quite obvious with existing dentition. And you know, when you're talking to a significantly older person, and it's not always necessarily older, but you can see the lower lip move up and down, and you have a bird's eye view of the lower dentition, and almost the upper teeth are non-existent to the point where it looks like there's actually nothing there. Another important factor is assessing lip lines. I know as dentists, we're always looking at high lip line or a gummy smile, and often most patients are concerned about these things. And I remember as a young dentist, it was always, oh, I don't have to worry because the patient doesn't have a gummy smile. So it was always the dentist saving grace. But you'll be shocked to know there's some varying statistics on this. But as an aesthetic dentist, we often we're not using that as an excuse. So whatever needs to be done to correct the tooth proportions, we're really not hiding behind the fact that the patient's not showing or displaying much of a lip line. But the general statistics when I first graduated or even well into my early career showed the variance amongst lip display. In particular, a lot of the significant high lip line data showed that it was only prevalent in 10% of cases. So it shows a medium lip line was about 69%. And you think, well, that's not too bad. I'm safe. If it's a significantly hard case, I can maybe get away with it, because the key is there's a lot of science and work that goes into getting ideal gum proportion. So if you had a lip line that hides it, most dentists will just hide behind that, or some don't even notice it. But what's even more important here is that the data shows something different. And what happens in this case is it's no longer 10%, the high lip line. It's in fact 38%. And that came out of a recent study by Christian Coachman, which was done not based on the traditional type static photos. So they did video capture to assess. And with video capture, which is really important when the patients are relaxed, you're able to slowly move the frames across and work out when the patient's relaxed and at rest, how much vertical movement or vertical mobility there is at the upper lip. So this totally flipped the statistics on its head. And we found in most cases that a high lip line was almost in 60% of the cases, which was interesting. Another aesthetic or smile parameter that is often treated and looked at, particularly in the aesthetic space, is the buccal corridors or the negative space that you find between the posterior teeth and the cheek. And that's something that we've got many ways to treat. We can either build out the jaw orthodontically, or we can add veneers to close that. But at the same time, we've got to be careful not to overfill that area so it doesn't look too toothy. So not only you want to broaden, but you also don't want to overdo that. What's also important, and I'm sure we've heard a lot about these golden proportions, so that the teeth are all totally in proportion from the anterior plane. In the more recent aesthetic space, we've moved to the red proportion, which is the aesthetic dental proportion, the RED, which found there was a lot more aesthetic benefits by changing the proportion slightly. I think by memory, the golden proportion started to show two small canines from the anterior. Now, these proportions, we're not talking about the size per se. We're talking about the proportions in relation to each other from the anterior view. Now, tooth proportion itself is a different scenario, and each tooth has an ideal proportion, and these are listed. So you've got canines and centrals, a variance, but they also vary for females and males, and that is important to note. And you can see the difference here in terms of the limits. So if you've got very short teeth, you'll find a width to height ratio of well into the 90s. But if you've got a narrow long tooth, you're going to have a much lower percentage. And it's all about the ideal tooth to height proportion. How do we get to these? For me, dentistry and being able to present and be able to achieve these results, we need to emotionally connect with our patients. And I find one of the turning points that really, really captivated me when I first got into digital smile design by Christian Coachman about 9 years ago was using smile design to capture and motivate the patient. And this motivational dentistry, which I thought, it's a very very passe sales pitch, was just a way to show a patient. But the more I got into digital smile design and realized how it's such a powerful tool to be able to really, really showcase to the patient your true capability of what is the ideal treatment for you, it was the day that I realized this is probably one of the most powerful tools in dentistry, not only for patients, but for me as a dentist, not only to better my work, but to be able to give me a very strict controlling guideline of what can and can't be achieved, and have a benchmark to be able to achieve the ideal. We can see here is a beautiful mock-up of a potential veneer case. Similar in this situation, and we will go through these workflows. So these are just mock-ups on the patients live to be able to show potential treatment outcomes, and each one is designed specifically, facially driven, follows the lip curve, follows all those parameters we spoke about, all in a particular design. And we can see typically in this particular presentation how we can show a patient exactly where they start and where potentially we can motivate them and give them a treatment outcome that's very, very predictable. And you can see here in Miguel's case, who wanted to lengthen his teeth, both gingivally and incisally. And how do you show a patient potentially what we can do specifically, not just approximately? So I use a lot of video. We're using, and we'll go through the workflow of what I do in terms of simulation and in terms of mock-ups. Here you can see the video on the left, Miguel prior to the mock-up, on the right, post mock-up. We're using the bisacral technique in this case. The models are printed on the Asiga, of course, very, very accurate models which allow us to make keys and putty. But you can see this is my everyday workflow of showing a particular patient after design what's the ideal shape and design and potentially what his veneers would look like. I would say comfortably to within 90%, even 95%. That's the beauty of digital. It allows us to actually do that. And so when patients see this, they get exceptionally emotional. And even myself as a dentist, because each case is quite unique and quite special. These patients are coming in with the hope of achieving a particular result. In fact, some of these patients don't know these results can be achieved. So how do we do that? Well, ideally, once we've digitized the patient, as you can see, we use the intraoral scanning, we generate a model. And we've been using digital dentistry for a good 7 to 8 years now. But I have to say the Asiga model and utilizing these models and their level of accuracy has really improved significantly what I'm able to simulate and mock up. In this particular case, these mock-ups you saw previously, we use the digital design, which is printed, which sits thinly over. So it's like what we call an additive mock-up. So it's a digital additive mock-up. We've got a specific silicon key that sits on top. And this is what we put in the patient's mouth and very carefully trim. And there's particular ways we trim the keys so that we get a beautiful, clean overlay. And again, it's only as accurate as the model and the key that you make. Another option is, instead of using bisacral, we can print our shells. And depending on the case, we will decide, do we use the traditional PVS where we place that in the mouth and let that sit, or do we print the shell and carefully use that? And in this particular case, you can see we decided to print a shell mock-up and place it on top. This particular case had an old implant, so it was quite complicated. We wanted to, well, our design was to look at how we could get some gingival harmony with the central incisors, and at the same time replace the crown implant and look at what the options are in terms of how we certainly weren't removing the implant. It's been there for years, but what could we do to improve the aesthetics? And using digital smile design and the shell technique, we were able to plan. So the planning was incorporating, that's the existing, and how we can incorporate a full mouth reconstruction, but also looking at incorporation of pink aesthetics to try and get the gingival harmony. And with the design and plan in place, we're able to mock up for the patient what are the options. Obviously, the final pink ceramic will be matched specifically for the patient. But in terms of a mock-up, we were able to use a shell, show the proportions on the anteriors, create some gingival architecture and harmony, and show the patient, motivate the patient that this is a possible treatment outcome. And we can see the difference. So how do we get from the patient on the left to confirm the patient with a mock-up to give them the exact final ceramic restoration? And we can go through these scenarios and just to give us an idea of exactly where we're at. It's very important to digitize the patient because, as you can see, once we've done that, we can start the design process. So we're looking at an ideal treatment. An ideal treatment involves facially driven design, gingival proportions, tick, tick, tick of all those smile parameters that we were discussing. And once that's done, we then have the blueprint, the template to show the patient, test drive, as we call it, mock-up, whatever you want to call it, and so that the patient has a better understanding of what is the final outcome. In this case, we've done our traditional mock-up and then we're ready to prepare the teeth. I use prep guides, so based on my final design, again, printed on the Asiga, I'm able to use these special designs to give me control. They're actually called control guides over how much I prep for the tooth for each case. So each case has a series of control and preparation guides. So I've got consistent preparation of my teeth so that I can get the ideal thickness of the veneer. I'm not over prepping, I'm not under prepping. The baseline of each case is factored in. If I have a darker tooth, it means the design of my control guides will allow me to prep deeper. If I have lighter, I don't have to prep as much. If I want to change the color significantly, the guides will be such that I will be prepping more or there's more distance from the external shell. So these are based on the contours of your final signed off design, the final veneer design that we're actually going to do. And as a result, we use that as our template. And from there, we're able to check in every aspect the design process. So just getting back to some of these, what we've got is each area has to be properly confirmed. We have the vestibular guides, we've got incisal reduction guides. All of these is so that the final design can be consistent, because a lot of these cases that we're doing now is, you'd be very surprised, and we'll go into these are milled block ceramics and then polished or lightly glazed and stained. With the ceramics nicely polished and glazed, you're able to produce these, particularly with these block ceramics that are multi, which mimic the enamel and dentine, some beautiful results. A lot of the preparation is quite consistent with the thickness. So as a result, that's built into the actual block as it's milled. And using the natural files of the digital smile design, the texture's already built. So with the milling protocols, it is, remember, and this is probably a little bit of a hard concept to understand. A lot of these cases, the digital wax up comes from true natural files. They're actual HD copies of real teeth. So there's a whole library database of beautiful teeth. And the beauty of digital, you can copy and paste for each design what is the ideal shape. And from there, your ceramicist and CAD technician can mill exactly without ruining the textures, because these beautiful files come with very, very natural textures. And as a result, you're able to get a beautiful, beautiful replication of a true texture for the teeth. So by being able to reproduce that, we can actually produce that in the final ceramic. So it's not always layered ceramic. In fact, a lot of my cases where protocols are followed and provided the substrates are an even color, I'm using natural biocopies of HD files and milled on a fine tooling to be able to achieve these results. And this particular case, it's a very natural, and a lot of patients want natural looking restorations. And as a result, you're able to achieve this quite easily if you follow the protocols. And you can see in this case, all these textures haven't been done with the burr. They're picked up in the actual prep file, which is quite important. And there's a whole process. Again, very similar case, but you can see in this beautiful photo, the actual striations and the anatomy. This is all replicated within very, very specific tooling within the milling. And again, a lot of discussion and setting up your milling units with your technician and CAD technician to be able to achieve that. Because if it's not done right, you will end up with just smooth textures, and it loses all the benefit of these beautiful natural files and the light reflectance and looking very, very natural. Like I said, a lot of patients come in wanting natural looking veneers, and this is becoming more and more a point that patients come in. I want natural looking veneers. I know I want veneers, I want to fix my teeth. I want an even shape. I want to look as though they're just been naturally straightened, natural teeth that look straightened. And that's really the MO. And we'll look at this similar case, post-orthodontic case. A lot of my cases, this one was referred to me, but most cases that I do, I tend to do orthodontics prior, because to get that natural effect, the more alignment you have, the less preparation necessary and the more natural the outcome. Again, similar scenario, lots of planning, lots of design. In fact, this case ideally, but she wasn't quite keen. I was advising some minor soft tissue work in the form of, particularly around the canines, a little bit of soft tissue grafting, but the patient, I think, was a little bit over dental by then. It was her second orthodontic round, and she just wanted to go to the next step, the next stage in terms of getting her teeth ideally fixed. And we discussed veneers in this particular case. But again, this patient came in absolutely mortified of the fact that if her veneers weren't as natural, what would they look like? And we assured her in terms of the process, what is actually done. So not only was the mock-up a confirmation for her, but showing what we do in terms of very specific reductions. So as part of my design, we design also step-by-step reduction guides. So there's the initial reduction guides to get rid of the existing edges so that my definitive control guides can be seeded. And there are three main ones, and you can see there's the vertical ones. That's basically the labial guides, so that we have a good indication of all the labial reduction. You can see on there, you're able to consistently see the amount of tooth structure needed to be removed. And we've got the perimeter of the final veneer because we've designed our final veneer. The final veneer design is confirmed. It's exactly down to the millimeter of where those teeth are going to be, so that when we design our guides, it's based on where the veneer. So if you have enough reduction in that area when the guides are put on, then there's no need to reduce or reduce less. We've got the incisal guides, you can see also there. So incisal reduction based on the final incisal edge position. Then we need to look at, depending on each case, whether occlusion is an issue, depending on what is the thickness required, where we want to finish it. We know where the final finish line is. Then from there, we can decide how much reduction, what kind of design, veneer design is best suited for this case. So you've got incisal edge guides, you've got the labial guides, and then you've got also the vestibular guide. And you can see that purple guide, which you can see from the occlusal. So that is a guide used to look at the interproximal reduction, so that there is enough reduction interproximally or as you taper into the adjacent teeth, because it's not only important to adjust labially and provide enough space for the ceramic, but if you get into the embrasure, into the junction point, and you're limited, your ceramic will thin out, and then it will not be able to be merged. And what will happen is then you'll need to thicken that up. And once that happens, you've thrown your design out significantly. So this is something that's really, really important. So by having these control guides, you're able to create the ideal reduction, the ideal space. And in this case, you can see the final ceramic. Again, this is a milled and stained case, but you can see I take certain photos at an angle just to be able to capture the texture and really show the significance of these beautiful files and just how natural they look. And for me, this is a beautiful result because it looks so natural. Patient was exceptionally happy because her biggest fear was to have an unnatural looking veneer. So between her arch alignment, the right texture, and we can pick different files. So there's, based on having a discussion with the patient and the initial consultation, there's certain digital files that have a lot of texture. There's others that have less. And if the patient loves something with lots of texture, then I will pick a certain texture for that particular case. This is an interesting case, which is really the epitome of many things that's digital smile design, but also just everyday workflows. How really a very user-friendly, powerful printing tool is essential. And originally, most people were really printing via their lab. Now, something like the Asiga just allows things to be whipped up very quickly, but also you get to really see how much more and more I know, how much more and more I needed. In fact, I'm going to hit upgrade for a second one soon, because we're just printing so many things. There's so many devices now that are being designed to make dentistry easier. And from, controlling guides in veneers to, we all know it started with implant guides, but now there's so many guides. I tested the other day a TAD implant guide. So using the CBCT, you can print a TAD insertion guide so that you can get it in the ideal. So you merge your CBCT with your STL and are able to design the ideal TAD points so that you don't hit the root stumps. So there's so many things that we can design, and great software and print. So I think it's now really accepted that a printer is really up there with an autoclave these days in your practice. Now, this case, we can see lots of issues here. We've got a serious cant. We've got high gingival display on one side. The smile is tipped on the right side, raised on the left. The teeth are out of sync. How do we do this? How do we get to this patient and show him this is what we can do on the right side? This is where we can get him to. Well, between these two, there's a lot of stuff that happens. Let's have a look. The first stage is obviously designing and planning, and this is all part of the process. This particular case was a 3-step procedure. There's the initial smile design, which you've seen and you're familiar with the previous cases. But from the smile design, we based on generating our periodontal surgery guides, which is what we needed to do in this case. So the ideal tooth position couldn't be achieved just by prepping the teeth. There also had to be an analysis of the bony margins, the gingival position, and then use that as the guide to be able to design the ideal and final bone levels. And this is what's really important. Because you have a design, we need the final outcome, but we also need to have tools that we can print and use during the surgery. My periodontal analysis, based on where I want to finish the final veneer that is facially driven, is the basis of which we finally. And what I've been using lately, and it's a godsend in terms of crown lengthening surgery, and I'm talking not only soft tissue, but also the osseous component. So as you know, crown lengthening can either be just soft tissue in areas where it's 1 to 2 millimeters, or you've got at least 3 to 4 millimeters of space from where the bone starts, a biological width. But if you're encroaching on the biological width of where your final aesthetic outcome could be, then it involves some osseous reduction. And we need specific tools to keep us in the right position. And the DSD Perio guide is really that tool, and it is amazing. The case on the left was just purely a soft tissue guide. I didn't tape the case on the right, but it will just give you an idea, except the case on the right, which is the previous one I showed you, shows just how we use the Perio guide. You can see in the video, this particular case was post-ortho from many years ago, maxillary excess, and it was basically just getting the gum positioned and using the ideal gum position, using digital smile design and using the Perio guide to recontour the bone. And you can see the first stage is the soft tissue component using the actual guide. And once we've done that and we've got our proportions, now these gums won't stay there if you don't go to the next stage and actually reduce the bone accordingly, where in this particular case, across on the left, the bone is reduced anything from 2.5 to 3 millimeters. So not only at the margin, but also in between. And the guide allows us to, I love drawing on bone all the time. So not only reducing around the root tip, but also in between. And you can see in this case, it's sutured back on and then allowed to heal for 6 to 8 weeks. I use ultrasonics so that we're not damaging the root. And then this particular case is sutured back. Getting back to the case on the right was a little bit more complicated, because once that was done, you can see that's immediately post-op. Once this case on the right is done, it's sutured. We have to allow a period of 8 to 10 weeks for healing so that we can look at the next restorative phase. So you can see at the healing stage, we've got maybe 8 to 10 weeks, and then we're ready to start preparing. And this is where we've used our periodontal guides, we've done our osseous surgery, everything's healed. 10 weeks later, we're ready to prepare the teeth in the ideal position that we've signed off on. Hence, we use our preparation guides. We already have our design, and you're familiar with these control guides. Again, it's a close-up of the labial. You can see the interproximal to be able to achieve these. And again, it's a protocol following the design, using tools, being able to conveniently print, being able to easily print all these tools to help you to achieve the desired outcome, which you're able to very confidently show the patient using digital dentistry. And that's the final outcome for case. You can see beautiful gingival harmony, ideal proportions. It was a tough case. He does have fairly large teeth for his mouth. So there was a whole design element. We had to align with the rest of his mouth, the cant, create the illusion, follow the lip line, again, using all these small parameters to be able to achieve the ideal scenario. Because when you start doing this work and motivate the patient and you're showing what can be achieved, you have to be able to deliver. And that really is the most important thing in dentistry. And a lot of people can do beautiful mock-ups and get the patient motivated, but if there's a clear disconnect between what has to be done, or having a multidisciplinary approach, or having the right team. I'm fortunate enough to be able to do a significant amount of my multidisciplinary work, almost all of it. But that's because I chose to, and I've had quite a few years to be able to study and further my knowledge. And this is something I encourage all dentists to do, because to be able to achieve these results, you have to at least study them and understand what treatment modalities are available. And this for me is the most important factor. So I hope you enjoyed this presentation. I know it's a lot of many different ideas, probably different to what most people do in their everyday practice, but just a little sort of glimpse into how we incorporate my everyday workflows, and just how important having a really reliable printer and being able to print these fantastic devices, and being so sort of ready and at hand to be able to achieve these results in everyday practice.
That's great. Thank you, Fadi. That was
Have
awesome.
you enjoyed that, Graham?
Yeah, that was really good. It always fascinates me, this. It always, because we manufacture 3D printers for many different industries.
Yeah.
And just to see the level of design, there's design, engineering, everything, and it's, you know, to make sure that the patient gets the outcome that they, you know, ultimately desire. You know, it's just fascinating, and I'm so glad that we're in dentistry, because that's my interest in 3D printing, is to, you know, just improve somebody's way of life, you know.
And that's what you hit the nail on the head, and that's what it is. There's, you know, and you saw some of those guides, and, you know, I can go back to some of these photos. You know, in this particular photo, you can see these little guides. The bottom left, it's designed so I can trim the edge of the tooth to the ideal position, and I don't have to think about it. The one above trims it back so that the next guide sits on it. So these guides that I use on the left have to be done before I can place the other guides. So just sequence, you know, almost sequential preparation guides to be able to do it. It's these little gems, little tools. And this is what digital dentistry is about. And the fact that you can print these tools that better your clinical outcome is insane. And there's so many softwares out there, so many designers, there's so many places that can do this stuff for you and send you the file and you print it. So you don't have, and I think we had this conversation offline, you know, for me, I'm not very technical with this stuff. I'm a clinical basis. I know what I need. I wouldn't have an idea how to design and do these, but I know I work with CAD specialists, I work with planning centers, digital designers. I know what I want and they design it for me and I use it. So there's a lot of services out there. Don't think I get in there and design all of these. I have people design them for me. I know what's available. So I'm just happy I've got my printer. I can print them and I can prep and I can follow my protocols. So that is an important point, and it shouldn't scare clinicians out there that these results can be achieved, because there's so much good stuff out there.
So if you look at this case as one example,
yeah,
there's multiple stages of guides.
Yeah.
It's a fully guided workflow.
Yeah.
Are these, you print these in-house, but are you designing them in-house? Or are you going out to a planning center or
No, I've got my planning center. The planning center does everything for me. That starts off with my design. I've given my prescriptions. I get my design almost like an Invisalign. You know, there's a lot of back and forth, redesign, tweak, going through all these things, because they've got very smart CAD designers that can whip this stuff up quickly. For me, it'd probably take me a week to even just load the photos and start the process. So we're able to tweak, design, change. It's all back and forth. So that's the first step. And once we've confident with the design, once I'm happy, it's all ticks all my SMILE parameters, which we went through. Then when I do the motivation and mock-up from there, then I say, okay, I'm happy with what I designed. Sometimes there's a tweak. So I might redesign or modify the design because something you see in the mouth you think you can improve, or there's a comment from the patient. That's the beauty of a trial smile, and that's the beauty of being able to test drive. And then we'll say, moving on. Now, this is the control guide. So we've decided we're going ahead and we're actually going to do the work. Then there's a whole series of things to be able to get you to achieve that. And aesthetically, from reduction to the gum, all these things. And again, these are tools. And the more tools you have, the more likely you will achieve the final result.
Yeah, and I know that you studied orthodontics as well. How is that?
Yeah.
Is that part of your? Obviously, that won't come into play with every case, but it was just interesting to hear there's an element of orthodontics. You look to align, bring the smile into the, an approximate location before you go ahead and do the preparation. And
yeah. 100%. It was orthodontics was the first discipline I went into literally the year I graduated. So I've got 2 postgrad degrees in ortho, 2 postgrad. I've got 2 graduate diplomas, one in digital orthodontics and conventional orthodontics, because my mentor when I first graduated was a general dentist that restricted his practice to ortho only. And he brainwashed me into how important understanding orthodontics is. Because orthodontics, you have to understand ideal tooth position, ideal gingival position. And he was one of the big advocates for, arch expansion and, those concepts where people were extracting teeth. So he was more of the European and American teachings. So for me, I was brainwashed at a young age in terms of, or young dental age, what the importance of orthodontics. And every new graduate that comes up to me when I do my lectures and so forth, what do you recommend is the first thing? I said, you need to understand ortho. Whether you do it yourself or not, you really need to understand orthodontics, because once you understand orthodontics and alignment, you will understand aesthetics and everything else comes naturally, because orthodontics allows you to align teeth in position. If you're missing teeth, you're able to put the ideal space. If you're looking at restoring teeth, you can line them up beforehand. If you're looking at aesthetics, you will align beforehand. I've even aligned cases after I've done the restorative. So it really is important. And for me, it's a big part of my assessments and protocols.
Yeah, that's interesting. I've got some questions here for you. Those were part of my own. It's really great to see things like this. You've blown my mind there, Fadi. So there's a question here about what software you use for design. But
the planning center uses Nemo Tech, very powerful software. I tried using it myself. It took me forever. So I did, I've still got it. It's cost a fortune, but I just use the planning center and my designers there. It's an amazing software.
Yeah. Okay.
And there's other design software out there, but the Digital Smile Design or DSD Planning Center uses particularly Pneumotech, if that's the question.
Okay. What material do you use for the mock-up?
Mock-up. So I'm using the denture tray for the model, and then I'm using the PVS key on top, which I didn't show the slide, but we actually cure it under pressure in a little pot to get, because the Asiga models are so beautiful, because we're printing the HD version of because when I get from the planning center the digital wax up, it's a beautiful HD version. So when we print it, there's a couple of weak points here. So if you have a very, very accurate model, but a really substandard key that gets on top, you've sort of missed out on this beautiful model. So we've got the beautiful model now. In the last 2 years, I've been putting a key on in a little pressure cooker, little pot, basically curing it under pressure. So you get this beautiful adaptation of the PVS key on the beautifully printed model. So that's what I've been using. So the denture tray models, and we put that PVS. So we've been using that also for the shells.
Okay.
As well. And lately, which we've been using more so for when we're doing our temporaries or mocking up sort of build-ups of occlusions, we've been using the GC material, which is quite good.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's sort of the other question. What are your general everyday go-to 3D printing materials? And I know we spoke earlier about the GC. Are there any others that you use in your clinic?
GC, there's a NextDent model, the Dentatray. So we've got those three: NextDent,
Okay.
GC, and Dentatray.
Okay, that's great. And how long have you been 3D printing for? And what made you go for the Asiga Max UV?
We've been 3D printing because we did it. We were sort of one of the first to do the DSD. I think we've been 3D printing for 4 years. Yeah, maybe close to 5.
Mm.
And what made me go to the Asiga was when I wanted to pick up my Formlabs and throwing out the window because I needed a desperately urgent print for a patient that was coming in for a mock-up. And my assistant goes to me, yeah, that's still another 2.5 hours before we're finished. And I thought, no, this can't be right. I mean, we were excited when we first got it because, you know, we were just fascinated that it's printing. But the fact that it took so long, and when the Asiga came out, it was like, you know, it was like walking everywhere and all of a sudden you're in a car. That's the only way I can compare it. I mean, you know, all due, you know, credit when I first got the Formlabs, it did do its thing. But as you can see, as dentistry got more complicated and more demanding, I couldn't do any of this stuff, or would drive you nuts. So the Asiga, something, redesign, reprint, it was easy. And for me, I was just sold.
Yeah, yeah, great. And so with a typical case of all these guides, do you just throw them all onto a single build? So you can get them all through and out in how long would it typically take to print something like that? It would be under an hour, would it? Something like that?
Oh, the girls have got it down pat, like 45 minutes. And in fact, what I do is, because they are a bit delicate, so the girls do 2 builds for me. So they'll do one that's ready and they'll just do a backup one. Because sometimes you take them on and off, they break, you don't have to stress about it. So I will have 2 ready to go. You know, it's not a big deal. Sometimes I use it, sometimes I don't, but it's just one of those things. You just have it ready. So you can be, you know, you don't have to be as delicate, because some of these, they're quite delicate. So that's why I'll have a few spares ready to go. And because it's so easy, it's not a big deal. You're better off, you know, just having everything, have more guides than less guides. So yeah. And it's because it's so quick, you know, you don't think twice about it. So we always have a couple of sets ready so that I've got them. If one breaks, we can replace.
Yeah, I hear that quite regularly from customers. They always like to have a backup for you know, various reasons, whether it's just for just documentation. But yeah, it's definitely good to have a backup in case something breaks.
Yeah, and it's easy.
Yeah. Yeah. Great. Just scroll through these questions. I think that's it, actually. There's I think there are a number of questions here, but I feel that we've sort of answered most of them in you know, with what you've already said. Yeah.
I didn't bore them to death.
No, we've still got a good list of attendees, which is great. So thank you everyone for staying online. And yeah, look, Fadi, it was really, I find this stuff fascinating, and it's really interesting for me just to see your workflow, and especially down to the detail of having a guide for every stage of the way, because it's just a fully guided workflow, and it's awesome to see.
Yeah, no, it's definitely the case. And the more you practice dentistry, and I've noticed this even with implants, you know, you've been doing it for years and you think you're actually, you know, your implant placement is just going to get better and better. But until you start doing guided stuff, you realize, excuse my French, how crappy your placement was prior to using guided dentistry. You know, I used to pride myself, I'll open an implant. Now, guided. That's it. It's a no-brainer. You've got everything, just do it. And it's really is the way to go, which is really great because some of these young dentists coming through who only know guided are just placing these beautiful positioning. It's like perfect. So keep going with that because it is important. And that's something I picked up on. So as a result, I've just realized, geez, you know, there's room for improvement here, regardless how experienced you are. You can't beat guided, digital, mechanics. So, you know, why fight it? Just embrace it.
Yeah, it's, I suppose you with the patient acceptance, you know, you're showing the patient what the outcome will be, and you've all these guides and the, you know, the quality of the design is, you know, they've already signed off on it. So it's, you know, you just have to follow the stages and you get there at the end. You know, obviously there's an element of skill and experience involved in there.
Just a little bit.
Just a tidgy bit, yeah. There's a question here about permanent crowns. Have you ever tried 3D printing permanent crown materials? And there was some interesting materials. This one specifically lists the Vasio Smile, which is the Bago material, I believe. So there's the Bago material. I think there's permanent crown materials from Ceremco.
Yeah.
Have you?
I spoke to them.
DTAX also have one as well. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I saw that and I was intrigued when I was actually, I went over to IDS, the last IDS before COVID hit. I was actually speaking for a company there and I saw that and I was actually at their stand and looking at it. I was like, walked past and I was scratching my head. I was thinking a 3D printed crown. So it was quite interesting. I haven't done any of that. For me, because if I did a crown, I'd be milling a crown. But yeah, there's going to be some great stuff coming out. So, and to be able to do a lot of this stuff now, especially a lot of the full mouth cases that we're doing, I'm tending to, whether it's, you know, I'm seeing more and more vertical wear. So we're opening a lot of the verticals a lot more. So we're able to do the beautiful designs and test drive, but now we're able to, you know, print these restorative materials so that we can open the vertical, let the patient get used to the ideal new height, test drive the anteriors, a whole lot of that stuff, but being confident with the wear of the materials. So that stuff is going to be amazing.
Yeah, so I know that from IDS, we were at IDS this year, well, just a couple of weeks ago through our German office. And we had a few permanent crown materials on display. And I think that's sort of the next, it seems to be going that way from the material development. There's a lot of energy and, you know, effort going into producing this next generation of materials, and the permanent, fortunately for dentistry, I'm talking about 3D printing in general, but fortunately for dentistry, materials like permanent crown materials, direct 3D printable aligners, and a number of other things. There's a number of manufacturers that are actually developing those. So I know for the Bago material, they have, that's certified as a permanent crown material, the Ceramco, and also DTAX, and I'm sure many more will be following. So it'll be interesting I'll be interested actually to maybe try and organise some of that for you if you're interested.
Yeah, that was my next question. I'd love to. Yeah. There's something like that. Imagine, you know, using those materials, because now what we've been using is, you know, I've been milling certain materials for test driving and just building up bites and so forth. But to be able to do that would be amazing, because not only because milling is laborious, because it's one at a time and it's a whole heap, but, you know, to be able to print, you know, all the crowns in one go that you're going to be using and design, print, put in, whether we, you know, temporarily cement or so forth, that's a game changer. You know, that's a total game changer.
Yeah, well, just on that, I'm going to do a little sales plug.
Yeah.
In that, and it's just to show our open material system system. So here you can see these manufacturers are part of our material library online, and these are just dental material manufacturers. So because we're an open platform, we offer fully optimized settings from all of these manufacturers. That as these materials come to market, they're available for Asiga printers, and that just enables you to use these types of materials. So we'll have a chat after this, Fadi, and maybe we can arrange to get some materials from one of these manufacturers, so you can do some printing, see how it fits with your workflow.
Yeah. Well, I'll give my son a plug, because he uses my Asiga, and he's got a splint business, and he uses the Keystone Soft, and and it's amazing, absolute amazing material. So he's got quite a few dentists that sent to him digital files, uses the Keystone. Fantastic. So splintking.com if you want to do.
Yeah, okay, there you go.
But that was all basically using that material. So it was pretty beautiful stuff, and that was because it's an open platform.
Yeah, so we've got good relationships with Keystone. They make a really just a really good range of materials. And that one specifically is, that was the biggest material release from IDS in 2019.
It's an amazing material.
Yeah, it's awesome, and we've got lots of customers using that. There's no other questions here. So I may just wrap up, Fadi. We do have another webinar planned for later this month on the 27th of October with Dr. Brandon Owen in the US. He's going to come on and he's going to talk about orthodontics, but specifically around placing brackets using an indirect bonding process. So we'll send an announcement out for that very soon. But for everyone who has logged in today and watched our webinar, thank you very much for watching. And Fadi, I can't thank you enough. That was really awesome. And
my pleasure.
We should do it again sometime soon.
Anytime. I'm right here. I'm looking forward to seeing you when you come up.
Yeah. I'll stop in for a coffee. Maybe you can check my smile.
No worries. I'll have your prep guides ready.
Yeah, great. All right, good stuff. All right, well, you take care, and to everyone watching, thanks again.
Good night, everyone.
Take care, everyone, and we'll see you soon.